This is Tim.
This is Jonathan.
Welcome back to The Average, where we don't just review movies, we dig into what makes them unforgettable.
We're talking everything: script, acting, music, direction, the ingredients that make a movie more than just a film.
Everyone brings their own perspective to the table. What hits home for me might not resonate with you, and that's what keeps things interesting.
Exactly, and that's why we want you to join the conversation. We'll rate the movies, but your thoughts are just as important.
Whether it's a brand new blockbuster or an old school cult classic, we're diving in, and we're ready for the weird and the wonderful.
Or go head to head on big debates. And let's be honest, our opinions don't always align.
But that's the fun of it. We're here to celebrate movies, spark some debates, and share different perspectives. Before we jump into today's episode, remember to like, follow, and subscribe, whether you're on YouTube, Instagram, or your favorite podcast platform. Your support keeps us going.
And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you're always in the loop. Trust us, you don't want to miss everything we've got lined up for this season.
So speaking of exciting things, I've got something to share. We've got something to share as of this week. My new horror novel, The Harvest of Briarville, is now available on Amazon. It's not real thick. If you get the hardback, it's less than 200 pages. Nice, quick read. So if you're into creepy, suspenseful tales, rural settings, on a farm, small cast of characters, you'll definitely want to check it out. On top of that, Jonathan and I, as of this week, are working on an audiobook with Jonathan reading it. So we're putting that voice of his to good use.
Yes, sir. It's a must read for any horror fan. Now for today's episode, we're thrilled to welcome a special guest, Aaron from A&B Horror Movies and Aaron's Movie Page. If you love deep dives into horror, you're going to love this.
So Aaron, joining us to talk about Leigh Whannell's latest Wolfman, we're super excited to have you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you both for having me on. This is going to be fantastic. I look forward to chatting about Wolfman and being a guest. This is great.
Yeah. So you want to tell anybody who, let's be honest, most of the people listening to us have probably already heard of you or seen you or follow you on Instagram. So, but do you want to plug what you do for those of the listeners who might not know?
Absolutely. So I co-host a YouTube channel, as you mentioned, called A&B Horror Movies. I co-host it with my friend in the UK, so we kind of bring that spin to it. I'm in the States, he's in the UK, so it's really cool to have those different perspectives. We launched it a couple of years ago, and it just keeps on growing. And so we are on Instagram, and I also have an Instagram page where I focus on pretty much horror movies for the most part, and that is Aaron's Movies 8587. So you can find me on there and also on YouTube.
I think that's where I found you. I started getting your little movie recommendations, and I love seeing those. I started adding them to my list. I know I've messaged you a couple times about I got to check that one out. Yes. I love it. Great content, man. So thank you again for being here. So before we dive into Whannell's take, let's talk about the evolution of the Wolfman in cinema. It all started with Lon Chaney Jr. in 1941, portraying the tragic character of Larry Talbot in Universal's The Wolfman. His performance laid the groundwork for the werewolf as a sympathetic monster cursed by forces beyond his control.
Yeah, Chaney's portrayal set the tone for decades, blending horror with pathos. The character became a staple of Universal's monster lineup, appearing in various crossovers like Frankenstein meets the Wolfman and House of Dracula.
And correct me if I'm wrong, isn't he in one of the Abbott and Costello meets movies? I know we have The Invisible Man, Frankenstein. I cannot remember. That is on my list. Someday I would love to just go through the Abbott and Costello horror movie.
Huh.
They're horror comedy gold. That's what I was raised on. So I can't remember exactly. So let's fast forward to 2010 when Benicio del Toro took on the role in The Wolfman, combining wolf and man into one word this time. A more gothic and visually intense remake. While it tried to capture the essence of the original, it leaned heavily into the tragic romance and dark atmosphere, though it didn't quite hit the same iconic status.
Yeah, so With Leigh Whannell's 2025 reboot, we see a big shift. Whannell's Wolfman blends the psychological horror that he's known for with a modern take on the classic story. It's no longer just about the curse of the werewolf. It's about the psychological and familial toll it takes, which feels very contemporary.
And that evolution is what keeps the Wolfman relevant, from Chaney's cursed everyman to Del Toro's tortured nobleman, and now to Abbott's modern family man. Each iteration reflects the fears and anxieties of the time.
Whannell's version taps into the idea of protecting loved ones from the monster within, a theme that resonates deeply in today's context of familial and personal responsibility. It's fascinating to see how this character has transformed over the decades, always maintaining that core tragedy, but evolving with the times.
So, whether you're a fan of the classic Universal monster or new to werewolf lore, Wolfman offers a fresh perspective while paying homage to its roots.
So let's dig into Leigh Whannell's Wolfman. This 2025 horror reboot of the classic Wolfman from 1941 brings a fresh, terrifying take on the iconic werewolf story.
Whannell co-wrote the screenplay with Corbett Tuck, and the film stars Christopher Abbott, Julia Garner, and Sam Yeager. It follows a family man who, while trying to protect his wife and daughter from a werewolf, becomes infected himself, leading to his own monstrous transformation.
Jason Blum produced it under Blumhouse Productions, so you know it's got that signature Blumhouse touch. And with Stefan Ducio on cinematography and Benjamin Wallfish handling the score, it's a visually striking and sonically chilling experience.
The film had an interesting journey to screen, originally announced back in 2014 as part of the Universal's Dark Universe. It went through several iterations. After the underwhelming response of The Mummy in 2017, not the fantastic Brendan Fraser Mummy, the Tom Cruise Mummy, Universal shifted gears to standalone films. Whannell's success with The Invisible Man in 2020 revived interest in these classic monsters, and the Wolfman found new direction.
It's fascinating how the film evolved, with Ryan Gosling initially pitching the reboot and even being set to star. But after Derek Cianfrance exited as a director and Gosling stepped away from the lead role, Leigh Whannell took over and reshaped the project.
Filmed in New Zealand in early 2024, Wolfman hit theaters on January 17th, 2025. It's got a runtime of 103 minutes, and while it's received mixed reviews, it's definitely a conversation starter, especially for fans of classic horror.
It's interesting to see how the film balances its homage to the original Wolfman, while injecting Whannell's modern horror sensibilities. There's a lot to unpack, especially with how it handles the theme of transformation and monstrosity.
And that's what we're here for. So let's break it down category by category. We are getting into it now. This story will have just open conversation about each category. Aaron, if you think of something, interrupt us. I try not to interrupt, but sometimes it happens. But we're just going to bounce off each other, talk about each element of it, and at the end of that particular little moment, we'll give it a score out of 5 and how we think it stacks up. So let's get going with the story itself. So we kind of touched on how this story is different than the others. I want to preface this. For me, I'm not real big on werewolf lore. Not really forte. I took this as Wolfman movie, not werewolf movie. And I think there's something different in this movie in that element alone, because this kind of strayed from werewolf territory. I went back after this, watched the Lon Chaney Jr. one, and then I watched the Benicio del Toro one. And both of those are werewolf movies. This one is not. This one I felt was more Wolfman movie. So that in itself I thought was interesting, a new take, because one of the main elements that I noticed in the story, and I could be wrong, but in the previous versions, the Wolfman only appeared during a full moon. This one, once the transformation happened, he was stuck like that.
Yeah, no curse. It's more infection than curse. Or you don't really see any curse. It's just this form of infection that takes over and transforms you. So it kind of really changes. Is really different from that classic story that you get for it.
So I haven't.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, go ahead, Aaron. Yeah.
I was just going to say, yeah, exactly. There's no full moon. There's no werewolf lore in it. It's very different from like Werewolves that just came out, Stephen Miller's film, which is more action and over the top. This is more subtle and a different approach. So if you're going in expecting a werewolf movie, I think the audience was surprised to get something very different.
Yes. And I think that comes, it's going to be hard to talk about this without talking about, I've seen reviews all over the place. I've seen 1 out of 5 stars. I've seen 4 out of 5 stars. So some people really enjoyed this movie. Some people didn't. I know we've got a diverse response right here. So that's what I'm excited about. But I was reading that he was actually inspired, Leigh, when he was writing it, he was inspired by the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdowns. And so that kind of inspired the way he approached this. And once you know that, you can see it. Watching the family member become sick, locked inside this house, alone, that sense of isolation really leaned into this story, especially compared to 2010's version. There's hundreds of characters. It's insane. This one, there's 4. It's really slimmed down. This is an area where I appreciate some of what he did. I don't necessarily know how well he pulled it off, but I thought some of the things that stood out to me that were relevant, but it didn't hit home, was watching this transformation take a person you love. So it's almost, I don't know if it's a metaphor, analogy, one of those things, about watching someone you love growing ill and losing themselves to that illness. And so having just lost a grandfather last year and watching him slowly degrade over time, it's hard to watch. It's heartbreaking. And I could see that that's what they were going for. I'm not sure I felt it as much as I wanted to with it. I think there's something poignant there, but I'm not sure how much it hit me. That was something I noticed that was new to this version of the story. I felt like it's always been there, watching that person lose themselves. But this one really leaned into the heartbreak of the slow transition.
Yeah, the family is a central focus in this film. And I think what you're speaking to is that it was trying to be poignant and maybe a little bit heavy-handed in some ways, and maybe that's why it fell flat, because they spent so much time on the characters and character development. But I don't know, the payoff just wasn't good enough, I guess I would say, without giving anything away about the film.
Yeah. We try not to spoil when it's in theaters during release, but
absolutely. Exactly.
But if we want to, because the ending reminded me of another movie that I thought did it significantly better. So,
oh, come on, which movie?
Yeah, tell us what's going on.
Okay, The Fly.
Oh, The Fly.
The 86 Cronenberg Fly?
Yeah. The ending, yeah. I'm watching that going, man, I felt it way more in The Fly than I do right now. Even though it had very, very similar ending. The Fly hit home for me. This one, I felt like, oh, that's the Fly's ending is how I felt. So, other than that, though.
Yeah. That didn't even ever occur to me. Wow.
That's a great comparison, right? Because The Fly is like one of the best love stories in horror. Maybe Return of the Living Dead 3 comes to mind as well. And I just didn't feel that with this one. I don't know if it was the chemistry between the leads or the pacing. I don't know. It's hard to I can't put my finger on it, I guess.
I think the part of the story with like how the relationship between husband and wife was kind of rocky already kind of takes away from it a little bit. So you don't feel as emotionally invested like you would have been like with the situation with The Fly. So it's that sense of, dad's looking more out for his daughter while marriage is failing kind of situation. It's like, it's sad, but it has a slightly different kind of context of feeling than what you had in The Fly.
Absolutely.
But
yes. Go ahead, Jonathan.
So with the story itself, though, I like how there's not so much of the lore of like a curse, but you get that I can't remember what the name was. Like you see at the beginning credits in like the start of the story where they have that little bit where they're talking about it has more of a native influence with creatures from like native lore versus what you get from this like horror story lore kind of situation. It had a really interesting name, and now I can't remember it, and now I'm just like, dude, get it together.
No, I thought that element to the story was interesting, honestly. The kind of changing it from the curse, even though it's still a curse, but changing it to an illness that could almost be caught by anybody. That part was... All right, so let's bring up his Invisible Man. His Invisible Man was a fantastic reimagining of that modern day story. I love the Invisible Man movie. That was part of my hype going into this movie. That's why it made our list to review, because he did an amazing job with that. So
good. And can I just say that was the last movie I saw in the theater before lockdown?
Really?
Wow.
Speaking of lockdown and COVID, that was the last film.
That's a wild thing to compare, because I remember wanting to see it, and I watched it at home during lockdown. So I was...
Yes, I remember you could buy it. I was like, this is so novel, because it was late February and lockdown was in March. It was that fast. And anyway, I interrupted.
No, absolutely. Do that anytime you want. Anytime you think of something, say it.
We have a structure, but not really, so you can kind of freeform it if you want, and it's okay. It's totally okay.
No, I just want to talk and have a good time.
Of course.
So that movie I thought was truly inspired. I thought that was fantastic. It had moments like the restaurant scene with her friend. It had moments that caught you by surprise, shocked you. The ending was fantastic. So part of why I think a lot of people are disappointed in this film is they had that high expectation of what he did with Invisible Man. After watching the previous two Wolfman movies, I think he did a good job bringing it, kind of changing it, updating it a little bit. It seems to me the difference here is where I feel like Invisible Man was an inspired recreation. I feel like this one was the studio wants you to do this, come up with it. Like more studio pressure to create this one. And that's why there's those moments, those ideas that feel like we were going for something bigger that, as Aaron said earlier, just a little heavy-handed in the execution. And part of me wonders how much of that is studio interference, how much of that was Leigh's concept coming to fruition. Where does that lie? This movie left me a little bit perplexed. However, I did appreciate a lot of what they tried. So ultimately, for the story, I came out with a 4 out of 5 because, like I said, I did like interjecting some of those new elements, making it kind of about watching a family member lose themselves to an illness. I like those elements. I'm not sure it delivered on the family drama quite as much as it needed to be successful. So that's where I'm at.
What did you say, 4 out of 5?
Yep, I'm 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
Okay, so for me, I was 5 out of 5 because this was so vastly different from what we normally see when it comes to a werewolf movie, and with the different play of elements, with how you see with like the family breakdown, trying to rebuild, and then this happening, this tragedy, and everyone's still trying to keep it together. And then the way it turned out, and like the way it loops from like some of the stuff that you see in the beginning to the end, and how it just has it comes back around in certain elements. I thought it was wonderful. So for me, I thought it was great the way they handled it with the story. So yeah, I'm 5 in it, man.
All right, Aaron, where did you land? Zero.
Oh gosh,
Zero is
no. I mean, I'm kind of it's horrible. It's horrible. I'm kind of between a 3 and a 4. I feel like it's not a new. I mean, maybe if let's go with a 4 because I feel like he did breathe new life into the Wolfman story. I feel like a troubled marriage has been done so many times, and I don't think there was anything new there. In fact, it almost seemed like the two characters had no interest in each other whatsoever, and it's like, why even bother? There's one scene where he's asking his wife, "Let's go away," and the look on her face is like she'd rather just stay and work than spend time with them. So it's like, why even? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In a film to work where there's a troubled marriage, you've got to show somehow that they still love each other. And I didn't get that. And when you don't have that, you sort of lose the audience, I think. But I don't know. Maybe I'm being too hard on the film. I did enjoy it. So I would say story-wise, let's go with 4. I'll agree with you, Tim.
That was an excellent segue into the next category, which is the characters. So discussing the characters.
Oh gosh, I jumped ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You leaned right into it. So we'll discuss the characters and their arc throughout this movie. Because, like you said, that was probably my biggest issue with this film, is I never felt that connection between Julia Garner and Abbott playing the lead.
Chris Abbott.
Okay, Chris Abbott. And if I'm honest, I put that on Chris Abbott.
Christopher.
Okay, Christopher. I put that on him because I thought Julia Garner was good. She was really good. If you saw the Apartment 27A, 7A, the Rosemary's Baby prequel. Yeah,
I haven't. Yes,
she was really good in that. It's if you like Rosemary's Baby, it's worth watching. If you don't like Rosemary's Baby, just skip it. But Rosemary's Baby is one of my favorites. She's really good in that. Seeing her in this is a bit of a different role, and I thought she did well. What didn't connect with me was nice guy Christopher at the beginning of the film. I thought I liked him much better as the sick Wolfman towards the later part. But when he was trying to make those emotional connections at the beginning, it felt a little, to use that word again, a little heavy-handed for me. It felt a little bit like we see him and his father in that opening sequence that I thought was actually pretty good. I thought that was a pretty good opening sequence, and I was intrigued. And then we see that basically his father might have been a little rough around the edges and a little rough with him growing up. And then so what we see is him being super gentle with his daughter. So we kind of see two different sides and of parenting in that respect. And I also feel like there's definitely that message in this film when later during a end of the second act reveal. But the becoming the parents storyline is there, and that's where I didn't connect with him on that super gentle way that he was handling everything. And he just seemed like, even when he showed up with lunch for his wife, like there was something about the way that was handled that it didn't resonate. He wasn't standing there with flowers and food greeting her. He was sitting off to the side, like pouting, hoping she would notice him. And that's just, I know that's nitpicking, but because of that, when they're getting into these emotional moments later, I'm not feeling that connection. You know, I got the impression they were on the brink of divorce, and
yes,
okay.
So, and it didn't seem authentic.
Yes, and so there was no deep moment of love to make me think that his transformation was more heartbreaking for the daughter than it was for the mom.
Yes.
So that is where, I don't know, there was a bit of a disconnect. And then the daughter's just reaction at the end was a little bit like there were no tears. You know, from the daughter specifically, it was, that's what he wants. So this is where the movie kind of lost me a little bit, was on that character drama that I don't know. It didn't, I can't quite say exactly what moment it was that it didn't connect with me, but I give it credit for trying. It was trying to add something new to this. I'm just not sure it landed for me. So
yeah, I mean, like I said, it didn't feel authentic. It was almost like, what's the expression? You could see through the veil. You could see the sort of the acting element, and having him sit off to the side when he brought her lunch. It was, again, it looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world than where he was in that moment with her. So, I think maybe if they had thrown in some more tender moments, I mean, I don't know, something to show that there is a love here.
The moment of them like singing in the car together.
Yeah, exactly.
It was silly, and I felt like they were a family in that moment.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so maybe more of that. I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, they're both fantastic actors, and I mean, it does work on some level, but it just kind of misses the mark. The character wise, I thought the daughter, I mean, the actress was fantastic. I mean, how many times have we seen a movie with a parent-child relationship that's poignant and meaningful? It didn't seem like anything new, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. As far as character arcs, I guess we saw the most with what's the wife's name?
Charlotte.
Julia's. I think we saw the most with her as far as arcs go. But you kind of saw that coming, right? She's so aloof. She doesn't care about her husband. She doesn't care about her daughter. I don't want to give anything away, but even if you haven't seen the film, you've seen many movies, you know what's going to happen. She's going to come around and realize the job isn't everything, and my family is what's most important.
That's a good point.
You get elements of that.
For me, like it's how you see Grady like raising Blake at the beginning with that gruff kind of like solitary in the woods kind of thing, and Blake not wanting that, and like seeing how he handles his daughter, but you still see those moments where he's trying to repress all that stuff from what he picked up from his dad as a kid, and how his dad was those mannerisms, you know, why aren't you listening to me? You know, he's trying to hold that back. So, cause he so badly doesn't want to be like his father.
You can be scary. Wow.
Yeah, right. You mentioned that scene where she was like playing on the construction equipment in the city.
Yeah.
And my wife is sitting there watching, and she goes, why is he apologizing? He is correct. She was putting her life at danger and not listening.
I was pissed about that. I was like,
Yep.
So like you see that, you know, and it's like part of that idea of fighting the monster within, that sense of repression of the anger and those feelings that you want to throw out there, but at the same time not wanting to be that. You know, I think says a lot to part of that character development throughout the film, and then into the transformation into being an actual, you know, monster, as it were. And I think that sets kind of a tone there that you kind of understand with him trying to hold back while he transforms later on in the film. And even with Charlotte, and even though their marriage seems dead and failing, even with his mopey little sad boy act, you know, like he's still trying to make an effort to reconnect. You know, even though, you know, it takes its turn as it is. And Charlotte, you know, she's this workaholic. She's always stuck in this and just prefers to do this because he takes such a lead role in the parenting and handling their daughter Ginger with kid gloves, you know, in order to try to be a better dad than his own father was. Charlotte doesn't know how to connect. She's kind of scared. But as the film goes on, and with the changes in that sense of survival, you see Charlotte become a little more forefront and direct with her daughter and trying to make that connection. Like, I'm going to protect you. This is all going crazy. Even though this isn't working out and things are going bad for daddy, I'm still going to be here for you. So she still makes that sense to that effort to make that connection to be a good parent, you know. And then, you know, once everything gets towards its ending, having that scene where Grady and Blake are together looking at the valley, and then Charlotte and Ginger looking over the valley. Just that big connect, that big wraparound to it, I think is amazing. But I agree, Ginger, like as a daughter, maybe it's a shock thing, maybe it's trauma, so maybe she doesn't understand how to respond. So that's why maybe we see that lack of the tears at the end. But knowing that she loves her father and wanting him to have some peace through this, knowing that he's not going to get it any other way, man, it really kind of tugs your heartstrings in a way. So it's weird how that works out in the character arc, but. Yeah.
Question is, you brought this up. There's no way around it at this point. We find out that the werewolf that is initially haunting the family is, spoiler alert, his father. And so you mentioned we're trying to avoid that monster within that he grew up with. I walked away saying the message of this movie is that we can't. Because no matter how hard he tries to not be like his father, he ends up just like his father.
Oh, yeah.
So that's one of the examples where I'm going, is that the message? Or is that where like they tried to shove a message in and didn't end up with the same... with the resolution they hoped? That's one where I'm not sure. I honestly, the bleakness of saying we can't escape it is kind of like a little bit of bleakness to my horror movies sometimes. So I kind of like that, but it's also doesn't seem like what the movie was going for. It seems like the movie was saying that we can escape that. And maybe that's what is the very ending. He escapes it. He doesn't pass it on. So, but I don't know. I just wondered if either of you took that away from it, because that's when he looks down and sees the tattoo. Also, that foreshadowing was so on the nose. It was so on the nose. In that opening scene, oh, Lavelle tattoo. I leaned over to my wife and I said, guess what's going to come back up later? Because
of course, set it up, pay it off. Yeah, yeah,
so that just delivered. But I just didn't notice if anybody else caught that or thought that that was what it was saying. Because to me, I heard that no matter what, we will become our parents.
It can be hard to avoid.
Think of what is it, the Geico ads, or they they're dressing like their parents, like old frumpy people.
Yeah. I think there's an element of truth to that, because I find myself saying things that Dad said all the time growing up, and it's just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, you catch yourself at times like, wait, that's stuff my dad says. Why am I saying that?
Yes.
Yep. Well, there's definitely an element of you can't escape your demons, right? We all have our demons that we deal with on a daily basis. I guess I like that observation. It's more optimistic than sort of the bleakness of, what we see in the film. I would have liked to see Charlotte's demons a little more and see what she was battling with. That would have been an interesting duality, right? If they both had their separate monsters within. I mean, you already said the spoiler alert. Were either of you surprised that it was his father? I was like, oh, it's obvious.
Oh, no. After he gets the papers that they finally declared his dad dead after going missing, I'm like, the beginning where he's in the basement and Blake comes down, he's on the CB radio or ham radio where we're talking to somebody else about what he saw. I'm like, I know where you're going with this.
I knew at the beginning of that opening sequence, as soon as we take the moment in an opening sequence like that to focus on a tattoo that happens to be his last name, I was like, there we go. This is going to be relevant. We're gonna know. Right. So it didn't really surprise me. In fact, it was one of those moments that I thought was kind of heavy-handed.
Agreed. Yes.
All right. So scores.
All right, let me double check what I put down. I'm surprised by this. I put down a 4, and it is because Julia Garner, like Aaron mentioned, I did kind of enjoy her arc of kind of being aloof, not knowing how to deal with her daughter, to now being her daughter's comfort in this hard time. So I thought that was interesting. I did really appreciate something we haven't mentioned yet, and I wanted to, was seeing the father struggle in the Wolfman form to connect with his family. I actually thought that was kind of beautifully tragic. Again, it's one of those things that not quite executed to perfection, but it brought it brought something new to the Wolfman stories that we haven't seen. He's tortured, but it's always kind of been this: when he's the Wolfman, he's an animal; when he is human, he's human. And this, we slowly see him. I'll talk about it in special effects, but even when he was kind of couldn't speak anymore and animalistic, we see him being tender towards his daughter. And there's a moment when he's coming through that back door where he is reaching to the daughter, and Julia reacts to protect her daughter. And it's one of those moments that I was like, oh, that was actually kind of heartbreaking, because I felt that he was going to comfort a loving gesture. Julia took this as a threat and attacked. And now I'm like, this is the misunderstood Wolfman. So this is that tragic character. So I appreciated that. That's where I landed at on my 4, even if I think some of the other elements of it are a bit heavy-handed, could have been executed better. I did appreciate seeing him try, as he's losing himself, to maintain connection with his family. I thought that added a tragic and beautiful element that has been missing in other versions.
Yeah. I just want to say one thing quickly, and I loved that. I completely agree with what you're saying. And I loved the moment when he can't understand what they're speaking.
Yes.
And then he's so far removed.
That I thought was one of the best moments of this movie.
Agreed. Okay. See, I'm getting chills. There's some good moments about the film.
That's why we love talking. That's why we love talking about it.
And I'm usually not critical, so I feel like I'm being kind of hard on this film.
That's okay.
But anyway. Yeah, go ahead, Johnny.
I set it a 4 as well. I liked the development of everything from Blake and his trying to repress himself, not be like his dad, to that animalistic side coming out, still trying to maintain that connection, and then trying to defend them, even in the altered state, against what turned out to be his own father. And with mom, finally stepping into that parental role as a protector was pretty awesome. I gave it a 4 as well. I thought that was a good place with it.
Yeah, I would do the same.
All right.
I'd give it a 4.
So 4 all day.
Unanimous on the 4s for that one. Awesome. All right. So the music and sound design. This was a tough one for me. Because the sound design of, when he starts eating his arm, the sound design on that was so good. It was disgusting. I loved it. The sound design in general, this is where we talked. This is a good moment, actually, to talk about when he starts to lose the ability to understand his family. So it almost sounds like backtracking, and I don't know if that's what they did, but if you Satanic Panic in the early 90s and heavy metal was putting backwards lyrics on there that were satanic, if you remember all that stuff. That's kind of what the dialogue sounded like when we saw from his POV. We got backtracking kind of dialogue from his wife. And that's the moment that you understand Leigh tried to give us this insight to the transformation that I appreciated, of seeing it from both the family and the person who's transforming. So he goes to talk to his wife, and we hear the very first time, we hear him fine. And she talks back, and it's gibberish. We can't comprehend it. And it sounded like the backtracking. But that's, I thought that was really clever. That was one of those moments that I was like, this is good stuff. This is good. I'm going to give credit here, because that is just another element to add to the tragedy of, he has to find a way to communicate knowing they can't understand each other. So that audio, I thought that was smart. The typical bone popping, crunching, skin squelching, all of that was there. That was good. Yes. Oh, that arm scene.
Oh yeah,
that was gross. But the music itself was just good. It fit the scenes. It didn't. What stood out to me was it seemed very percussion heavy, which I appreciate. It was almost. I don't want to say it was intentional, but we're getting the idea that the natives in this land knew of this curse, and it sounded tribal drummy at parts. I don't know if that was what they were going for, but I thought that was clever. It was good. It wasn't memorable though. So that's my critique on the music. I thought it good. It fit the moments. Nothing took me out. The only time it kind of took me out was in that closing shot of the wife and daughter looking out. I don't know if it was my theater or not, but it was really loud. I was like, this music swell is loud for this moment. And that is the only time that I wasn't like, I'm not sure it hit quite that much, but I thought the music served its purpose, wasn't distracting, but I really appreciate the hearing that we saw from the Wolfman's perspective, how that spider on the wall, I forgot about that.
Oh, I was going to bring that up if you didn't.
Yeah. That spider on the wall, that I was like, who is crashing through the ceiling? And it's just a little spider on the wall. I thought those elements were really clever.
I thought the spider element was great too. I mean, I think with any score, if it's done really well, you don't notice it. So the fact that you're saying you noticed it in the end, then they probably should have scaled that back a little bit. Danny Elfman did the score. Danny Elfman, very talented.
Oh, he did.
So going into it, I just expected it to be good. I'd have to. So with me, when it comes to score, like I said, if I don't notice it, then I know it's done well. I'd like to rewatch some of the intense scenes, like with the the greenhouse, when they're on top of the greenhouse. Yes. I'd like to watch that with an ear for the score to see how clever they did it, and whatever they implemented there without really being aware of what you're hearing. And also some of the scenes that I love the most, I might be jumping ahead, is sort of the sprawling field in front of the house. Beautiful. When you see them running up to the house. I'd love to watch those again too, with the score in mind, to see what I think. But I mean, based on that, I'd give it a high score. I think it was really well done, and everything you touched upon, I completely agree with.
Nice. For me, it's mostly the sound design in this one that really gets me. The music definitely played its part and was great in my opinion, but just the sounds of everything, man. Like you were talking about, Tim, with like the squelching and the biting and everything. Even that point where he's like gets stuck in that bear trap in the barn, and spoiler, having to chew his own leg off to his.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh god, yeah.
Just the sounds that they really put into there, and like those, as early parts in the house as they're walking through, and he's slowly transforming. You're hearing like. Not just a spider in general, but there's some of those parts where you're hearing kind of like that deep, low heartbeat kind of thump throughout certain parts of it, that really give it a little more tension. That I thought was a really great effect with how they use sound. Just man, it's hard to really hate on it for me, because I don't know, I don't have much to say about the music. It's all about the sound design in this one for me.
Well, speaking of sound design, I loved that in the opening scene, the opening sequence, when they're in that sort of view tower, and all you can see is the breaths, the puffs of air, and this you could really hear the breathing, right? So I know they accentuated that. I think that was really effective and nicely done.
Oh yeah, definitely a good touch.
Yes, I agree. So the music in this one was Benjamin Wallfish, who I'd never heard of. Danny Elfman. Did 2010.
Oh, okay. I was mistaken.
No, that's okay. I was surprised when you said that. I had to look it up because I just watched 2010 last night, and one of the things I remembered was going, Danny Elfman did the music. So for a second, I'm like,
I was wrong. I'm sorry.
No, I was like, Danny Elfman did both of these? That's amazing. So I had to look that up.
Did he do Invisible Man? Did I get that right?
Let me see.
I don't know.
It's all good. I'm sitting here nodding my head like, yeah, but it's like, no, I just
here in my
mentioned in our
notes. I
intro
even
who
did
did
some research, and everything you see on the internet, you can't believe it.
You can't believe it all. Well, I'm going off IMDb, so I'm hoping it's right.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to issue a correction. I was excited that he might have. Nope, Wallfish did Invisible Man as well.
Oh.
So I was excited that Danny Elfman did both.
That's what I was reading, and I just had the name wrong. Oh, well.
That's all right. All right. So my final score for this one, I think I have it at a 3. Because I wasn't impressed by the music as much, but after we talk about it, the sound design does make me want to bring it up to a 4. Because the sound design I did think was pretty solid across this film.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll take it up to a 4.
Nice.
My only complaint about that spider scene, which was awesome in the film, if he's hearing a spider's footsteps that loudly, oh my God, imagine like someone snapping their fingers in the same room talking, his head would explode. It'd be like Scanners.
I thought the same thing.
Okay.
I thought the same thing. It seemed like a singled out moment to show us something, but there was none of that in the rest of it. Jonathan noticed the heartbeat throughout some of it, but I was like, everything would be exceptionally loud.
Yes, he wouldn't be able to focus or function, right? Anyway, a little complaint.
A little bit like Clark Kent in Man of Steel when he has to learn to focus on specific sounds instead of hearing everything at once. That's what that reminded me of.
Yes.
But
yes. Oh my God, imagine if you had ADHD.
I would be losing my mind because I do. So I would be.
You're like, what's that? What's that?
All right. So Aaron, where were you at on that score?
As we talked, I'd say 4. I mean, like I said, I'd give it a high score. The sounds were top notch. So,
Jonathan.
So I mean, like I said, they did a lot of cool stuff, I think. One thing I also forgot to mention that I really appreciated was that when it came to the Wolfman in particular, they stepped away from that wolf howl that you normally get characteristically. Instead went more with guttural growl, not knowing how to express or vocalize through the change. So I think that was really cool that they did that differently than the howl. But with the whole spider point, I think they put that in there like that at that point because he's still going through transition. Everyone is asleep. Everything is quiet. And that's when it really stands out the most because there's no other sounds really going on. Although it could be debatable with being out there in the woods and nature. Some other things you would think should be picked up a bit more, though. So I kind of get where you're coming from, Aaron, with that point. But aside from that, I'm still kicking it at a 4.
All right. So again, four is across the board for us. Oh.
I love that when you said howl, one of your dogs barked. That was like,
now my dog is outside my door trying to play.
Cue. It's like you planned it.
Yeah. Okay, she ran away. All right, so the editing and special effects.
Never mind. Keep going.
Go ahead. I was just going into next.
No, I was just going to joke. We did an interview with the werewolf director, and we were talking about werewolves, and my dog was barking at the mailman.
It's great.
Anyway, but keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going. Yes.
So moving on, editing and special effects for this one. So immediately off the bat, I love that it was practical effects. Almost, I'm pretty sure across the board, I don't remember a moment that I was CGI'd. The moment that might be was really just cool effect, not super significant, was Aaron mentioned the breath in that tower. Even if that's CGI, doesn't bother me. That was a super cool effect. Great moment. And I watched that, going back watching the 2010 one, where the transformation was almost entirely CGI. There were a couple of practical effects in that, but a lot of that, like skin looks a little bit too smooth. But this one, practical effects were good. His arm looked gross when it was rotting and turning. It looked gross. he looks gross. He looked pretty gross when, when it was taken full effect. So I know this is one that a lot of people have had issue with the end result of Wolfman. Because
nothing like
yes,
this, right?
nothing like that. And I feel like that has to be mentioned.
It's a Disney film, right?
I feel like that has to be mentioned because traditionally that's what we get. But as I said at the beginning, I felt like this was not a werewolf movie. This is a new story. Even though it keeps the name, this is a new iteration of it, much like Leigh's Invisible Man was a new telling. This, again, it's a sickness that you get. You're not a werewolf. It's you become infected. So that's how I can be like, all right, I'm not gonna lose my mind over it. But it also is one of those things that's mildly disappointing when you go into a werewolf movie and you don't get your werewolf. So I can understand the disappointment. I'm gonna give some credit and leeway on the fact that they never said this was a werewolf in the film. It is the title that leads you to believe it's a werewolf. So that's where I'm gonna give some leeway on the end creature design, is that it is very much a human sickness in this movie. It is a human infection. So I'll give some leeway there. But the practical effects were great. I think the editing was pretty strong. Aaron mentioned that scene on top of the greenhouse. I thought that was cool. Practical, I don't know if that's exactly where I would have hit, but it was a cool looking moment in the film. It was a pivotal moment in the film. I don't really have my one complaint on the editing. I did not care for the werewolf vision.
What?
So
that's like one of my favorite things about it. What the hell?
I did like the night vision.
Yeah, I did not care for it. So where I like the sound, and I do like seeing the change, seeing how he sees things. I just didn't care for the effect they used. I felt like the effect they used for that is going to look super dated in 6 years. So that is me. I'm being nitpicky on it. That's just my personal. I didn't care for that. But what I did think they do think they did. I said that backwards. What I thought was really cool was if you're watching his wife and daughter's face distort more and more over time. And I thought that was a really nice touch because at first, as he's beginning his transformation, he can still kind of see them. They're a little bit fuzzy. But then by the end, they're almost unrecognizable as the people we see at the beginning. So I thought that was a really cool, again, part of that tragedy of he is slipping away from them, but they're also slipping away from him. He kind of knows, like, that's my wife, but it doesn't look like her. So there's that element added to it that I thought that was another moment of showing that transformation that was super cool. Even if I didn't like the glowy little trees or whatever, but seeing their faces distort over time, I thought was a really nice and tragic touch.
Do you want me to go next? Yeah, I mean, agreed. The technique of that was fantastic. I actually really liked the effects. You mentioned the practical effects. Some of the best effects, I think, is a little bit of CGI where you don't notice it, but then mostly practical. And I think there are probably elements of that, especially when we rewatch, we might see it a little bit more through. But I like that they changed it up. It wasn't your traditional werewolf. They presented something new, and perhaps that's why people are, they either loved it or hated it. I think because it's so different, kind of like Halloween Ends. They tried something new, and either worked for you or it didn't work for you. So I would say I love the effects. I don't want to jump ahead to your future categories. I think they nailed it with the effects. And in fact, that's one of the things I would like to revisit when I do rewatch it again. And if you're unhappy with the effects and you want werewolves, like I said, watch Stephen C. Miller's Werewolves, which was a lot of fun in the theater. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but the practical werewolf effects in that are unreal.
I'm not really usually drawn to werewolves in storytelling. It's one of those vampires, werewolves, those classic gothic horror things. I guess for some reason I love them, but I'm not drawn to their movies that much. But then this year we have two exceptions, with Nosferatu being one of my favorite versions of vampire, so I have to go see that one. And then Leigh Whannell doing a Wolfman movie is what drew me to this one, which I might normally have skipped over. So, however, I still, after watching this one, I still have to say my favorite is the American Werewolf in London. That is still...
Oh, of course.
That's still my favorite werewolf movie. Out of
comedy, love story, rom-com, horror.
Yes, it checks every box. It's so good. Even my wife...
Zombies, even.
Yeah, we finished this one, and my wife goes, I think I liked American Werewolf in London better. And I was like, yeah, me too, but it's a very different movie than this one. So,
yes.
All right.
Yes.
I got Aaron's score was... Did you say 4?
Oh, I didn't say a score.
Okay.
For effects, man, I'd even go 5. I love the effects.
Okay.
See, for me, man, like what you normally see with werewolf transformations, and like you only get that third person perspective of what's going on with the werewolf in most films, and see what they did with the special effects. While you see that change in his perception of the world around him as the infection further sets in and he changes, I thought was one of the most fantastic things. You know, getting that sense of that night vision that comes along with certain animals, predatory in the wild, you know, and, you know, that the way he just sees everything so differently was super, super cool to me. That's like one of the things I appreciate most about this film, aside from how gory some of the effects were and everything. That really set it up for me, man. It was weird with how the faces changed over time as he gets deeper into the infection, but I just think it was intentional that it was supposed to make it seem like that, because he's losing base of himself, losing that sense of touch and connection with the reality and what their sense of perspective is. And then how they transition from him to Charlotte, what she sees from him and what he sees from her, I think played really well. So, I mean, for me, I was kicking it at 5 on this for the special effects. I don't really have much to say on the editing because I was just so stuck in the story and the tension of it all.
We are in agreement. All 3 of us are 5s. But I can't talk today. Man, I thought doing it earlier in the day would be better, but we are 5s on the special effects.
Speaking of CGI, I just wanted to bring up something funny. An American Werewolf in Paris, if you want to see a really bad werewolf movie with some bad CGI.
Because that one was 1998, wasn't it?
I think so, when CGI was not very good.
Yes.
I mean, it's not as bad as The Lawnmower Man, which is pretty bad, but this one's pretty bad. But you see, I still bought a copy.
Oh, so. Yes. Some of them are so bad you have to have a copy just for fun.
Yes, and before I forget, the Wolf Man... nope, never mind. I was thinking of Nosferatu. Oh. Anyway, well, I'll just say now, if you guys collect physical media, the Nosferatu Steelbook is coming out February 18th.
I was looking at pre-ordering it today.
And I think it's sold out on some places, but Walmart still has it.
Yes.
If you want to.
Target was sold out when I looked. Walmart was still available for $40.
I pre-ordered it from Walmart.
Yep, I might have to do that. My wife might kill me. I'm already over budget this month. But she liked that movie. Anyway, so
it was good.
It's good. Also, let's mention.
And all candlelight. Isn't that fantastic? Like the scenes, they filmed it all with candlelight lighting. I can't wait.
You can see it better than some movies filmed with digital lighting. It's incredible. But that's a great transition to bring up something that I wanted to mention was we get Nosferatu in December. And then 2 weeks later, we get Wolfman. And then 2 weeks after that, we hear that Robert Eggers' next film is going to be a werewolf movie set in 15th century England, maybe 16th. So I'm cool. Thrilled. I'm super excited about that. See what that is. One of the things I noticed between all three of these Wolfman films, and I know I have faith that Eggers will do it correctly because he did it with Nosferatu. The original Lon Chaney one, limited Wolfman on camera, very like keeping the monster off until pivotal moments. That was Lon Chaney one did that. The 2010 Wolfman had buff Wolfman slashing everything on screen majority of the film, and it kind of takes away. Honestly, the 2010 one it is a great unintentional comedy is the way I walked away from it. It's the Wolfman's throwing people, they're flipping through the air, hitting things. It's hilarious. And it doesn't mean to be. It looks really good. It just doesn't stick the landing. This one?
I don't remember it that well. You're making me think of Wolfman and Monster Squad. I don't remember.
I was going to say, anytime someone mentions a werewolf, my brain still always goes to Monster Squad, right? Where they kick the dude in the nuts and like, Wolfman's got nards. And I'm just like,
never gets old.
The 2010 one with Benicio is where, so I don't know if that's where they took this, but he inherited the Wolfman, the werewolf, from his father. So it's kind of part of that version, and that seeped into this one a little bit. I don't know if that was the intention, but it is when pretty cool transformation. They wheel him in like those old medical rooms where people are sitting around and you watch. They wheel him in the chair, and the doctor's like, I'm going to show you that it's all in your mind. And then he physically transforms and just massacres this room of people. And
great scene.
It's a great scene. But I'm like, man, this movie is unintentionally funny. It is unintentionally hilarious.
Like, I told you what was going to happen. And
yes. But my point was...
Now I need to rewatch.
Yeah, I recommend rewatching it, especially after seeing this one, because it did make me appreciate this one more. One of the faults of that movie is too much Wolfman on screen, too much werewolf. It kind of takes away that mysterious element. So Lon Chaney did that. I think that's why that movie had such an impact, was the special effects for the time period and the minimal use of the werewolf on screen. Then 2010 gave us an abundance of everything we didn't need. And then this one balances that edge. We don't really get full Wolfman till towards the end. It walks that line. And so I appreciate that restraint.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that restraint on this one. So that was just an observation after watching all three of them, that saying I think Eggers will be excellent at giving us the appropriate amount of werewolf on screen to maintain scare factor. Once you see a werewolf rip his sleeves off and knock a man's head off, 2010 version, it happens. Just knock a man's head straight off his body. You lose the scare, and it's starting to become comical. So I know Eggers will avoid that. All right, enough on that side trip.
Yeah, I mean, you're touching on the whole premise that what you don't see is scariest, like the Blair Witch Project. The reason why it's so damn scary is because you never see the witch. And then the Blair Witch, the third one, I think, kind of messed it up a little bit, because then by the end it's like an alien or something.
I see.
And it had me right up until the final.
That movie freaked me out, though. That was...
Which one? The first or the Blair?
The third one. I actually really... I'm one of the ones who I really, really like the third one, but I do agree with what you say. I'm still just glad that we saw that for like half a second.
I've never seen any of them. I never cared. I never
Oh my
cared.
God.
The premise
You have
didn't
to watch.
really interest me. I've seen bits and pieces, but I was like, I could watch something
If
better.
you want to see a great bad movie, watch the second Blair Witch.
Oh, yeah?
movie.
No, don't even. I don't know.
Just a
I'm
waste
not
of time.
sure. I have yet. I saw it in the theater when it came out, and I don't think I've watched it since.
It's pretty abysmal. It's probably one of the worst sequels. I watch it for charm.
Well, they rushed it, right? So they were trying to capitalize on the first one. So they wrote and filmed that movie in like
Yeah,
a second and put it out as fast
and
as
it's not even found footage. It's like a quarter found
No.
footage. It mixes real life, and then it turns out to be like some mad scientist. It's bizarre.
And then the old switcheroo at the end.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, jumping into
one of the
the
worst.
script. So the script for Leigh Whannell's Wolfman is, all right,
Mhm.
I've been generous. Do I say that this is where I critique it? So in the story, I think it had a lot of good ideas. I don't think the script successfully delivered. So this is one that I would be curious if there is an extended cut somewhere, if we get that down the road. In my mind right now, I can't imagine what could be added. So I don't know. And I hope it's more than, while I'm excited about 4 more minutes in Nosferatu, I'm also like, man, give me another half an hour. I want a Peter Jackson extended cut. Give me, yes.
Peter Jackson.
Yep, give me a full, like, additional movie. The script didn't do much for me. I thought the script was probably the single most heavy-handed element of this film. I hate to do this. I hate being so critical, but this was the moment that I have to come down on it.
It's what we're here for.
Yep. It didn't work for me. Even when they're like, touch my head, what am I thinking? I was like, this is corny. This is so cheesy. You can't think of something better.
It was cheesy.
It annoyed me a little bit.
And then
how often they did it.
Yes.
It was sweet at the end, kind of, but
we're like, okay, we get it. She's not really a mind reader.
Yeah, but then at the end when they pulled that, like, oh, she might be a mind reader, and I was like, what? It didn't hit for me. That was bad. I did not care for it. And
it's okay, mommy blew his brains out.
Yeah. And then, so yeah, that precisely. And using that kind of as your main connection to establish their relationship. I can pick up on it from the context clues and all the rest of the film that they're supposed to have a very close relationship. Using that gesture as frequently and often as they did was just kind of eye-rolling. The other part we mentioned, it had to do with Julia Garner's character. I can't remember it.
Was Charlotte being a workaholic, or like being defensive and like not wanting to be involved? What's going on?
No, it wasn't her. I actually thought she was fine. I thought they did her character right, but when we went back, it was the dad. Because we already mentioned, like, he apologizes to her daughter after she puts herself in a dangerous situation, and he reacts the way I would assume a father would when your child is playing in traffic. Those were a couple of moments that I was like, he was trying so hard in that moment to erase his own father and the way his father raised him, without kind of acknowledging that his father was also acting out of preserving his own child. His father knew the threat of the Wolfman was out there.
Fear.
And he was driven to protect his child. And yes, where I can watch that beginning and say the father was probably a little heavy-handed and abrupt with it and rough. The flip side of that is not like justifying your child putting themselves in danger, which is what I felt like we did later. So, and I know that could probably be nitpicked by other people, but when she's playing in traffic on traffic cones and he is get down. I told you not to do that. I'm sorry. Now it came to me. All right. This is the part that I strongly disagree with. And this is personal. When he is talking to his daughter and saying, I could never live with myself if this scarred you, if this traumatized you. I'm like, that bothered me. Because the way I interpreted what he was saying is not I need to teach you how to handle the hard things that come up in life the proper way. I took it as him saying, I need to shield you from any potential disagreement, harm, threat, whatever. I need to shield you from it. I can't let you deal with that. Instead of teaching her how to process that and deal with it. So that is, I cannot remember exactly what he said, but that was a moment where I was like, man, I taught junior high for 3 years. Well, I taught junior high for a year and elementary for 2 years. And
oh, wow. Congratulations. That's awesome.
The biggest thing I can see is that so many kids aren't taught how to handle adverse situations.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I heard in that moment is him saying she shouldn't have to handle them. He should protect her from them. And that's one where I'm just going, no, you should be teaching her how to process this dangerous or threatening or scary moment. Mm-hmm. Teach her how to process it and grow up and handle it and move on and how to deal with that. Because what's going on is not, there are some things that we're not going to get into, but then there are some things that you can process and move on from. So I just thought the way he presented that really rubbed me wrong, and maybe I'm going too deep on that one, but that was a moment that I was like, I don't agree. I think this should be a scary moment, and you should be talking to your daughter about how scary this is and how you're going to try to figure out how to get through it.
Right.
Okay.
That's like, do you understand why I yelled at you? Do you understand why this is dangerous and why I'm upset with you? Like, yes,
like maybe I reacted out of emotion and I was wrong for that, but I did it because, that's what I was missing from that connection and that relationship and that part. So that's what I said. The script is where I was coming down on this movie because I liked a lot of it, but the script, we've used this a lot, was heavy-handed.
Mm-hmm. Do you want me to go next?
Yep, that's my soapbox. So I can sit down.
There you go. No, yeah, I mean, excellent observations. Corbett Tuck, I hope I got her name right, wrote the screenplay, and she's married to Whannell, although maybe they're siblings. My research, now that you guys poked a few holes in it, I don't even know. But I think she is married to Leigh Whannell, so I can only assume that they sat down and wrote like a scene breakdown together and talked about all the beats, and here's the first act, second act, third act. This is how we should present it. Mm-hmm. But then the writing piece of it and how it translated to the film, it almost seemed like the screenplay itself perhaps could have gone through a few more iterations, like it was rushed. Mm-hmm. And there were a few moments where some of the lines, like even the one you're talking about, the lines, it's like I found myself rolling my eyes a little bit. And you're like, oh, maybe that looked good on the page, but just isn't working with the actor delivering it, even with these actors who are very, very talented. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't know. On the other hand, she wrote Insidious, and Insidious is well written. It's a very well crafted film, scary. All the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. I mean, maybe it just comes down to not even some of the best writers, or not everything they write is going to be fantastic, and that could be it as well. But I mean, I don't know. I'd say a solid B+, A- if I were grading her screenplay. And in fairness, I haven't read it, so I don't know how it reads on the paper. Yes. I can only assume. I don't know. I can just make assumptions, I guess. And that's my take. Screenplay wise, maybe a 3 or 4. Okay. Like I said, it could have been workshopped or a few more drafts, maybe.
Okay, right on.
Yeah. I don't know.
So I feel like I overscored it a bit on script, because now that I think about it as we talk about it, some parts of it just do kind of fall flat. I mean, the dialogue midway through the film when all the action's going on, you can't really pay too much attention to that because it's all action and reaction mostly for what's going on. But like that early part where she comes home from work, he gets the papers and the mail, and he keeps telling her to take the call in the other room, and she's just like, whatever, That seemed like a really stupid part to put in there. I feel like it was kind of useless, and that whole part of him being all like, I was like, dude, whatever. This is lame. Like, just crap. And like when they're sitting on the steps, when he comes to see her at work, and him trying to like plead with her in like a really crap way of like, let's do this. Let's come on. This could be good for you. You can work on your book. And she's like, well, I got stuff going on. I got things. I got a job, like whatever. You're doing nothing basically, when you find out when they're driving out to the woods in their moving truck. I don't know. Some of it was kind of weak, but even that part though, where they meet the guy he knew from childhood, his name was Derek or something, that they saw up in the hunting stand
in the deer blind. Yeah.
Like that part of like some of that conversation in the moving truck when he hops in, talking about, how'd you get so lucky, blah, blah, I have all this. And he's like, yeah,
they made him out to be a predator.
Yeah, it was a little creepy.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
yes. He's been in the woods a little too long. Like, what the hell? Like, he's paranoid, like other people out in the woods, out in the mountains for a long time. I don't know. But aside from that, though, there's not much I can really say on the script. I definitely need to change my score on that one. I'm gonna take that one down to a 3.
Okay, so scores. I was at a 2 on the script. Jonathan, you're a 3.
Yeah,
and Aaron. You were 3?
3. I mean, I hate to be critical, but yeah.
I know.
Don't hate it.
We're not selling this film at all. If people are watching, they'll be like,
well,
toss this out.
Thankfully, I think we've been pretty honest. So, but I have to pick a moment to come down on it, and this was the moment. But we can turn up and get positive and talk about the acting. So
top notch.
Yeah, I thought the acting was very good. I said I had a little bit. I didn't quite believe I'm so bad with names.
Which one?
Christopher Abbott.
I just keep going back to
Blake.
Christopher Abbott.
Yeah, Blake.
Blake, Charlotte, and Ginger, your main 3.
Yeah, I didn't quite believe him in the beginning of the film. I wasn't buying it, and I think I wasn't buying it. But then once the transformation started, I thought he was excellent. I was actually all on board there. I thought Julia Garner delivered in her performance, and I think it comes down to whether you like her character or not, that kind of aloof and can't be bothered at the beginning. But I saw some heartbreaking transformation delivered by her. I thought the daughter was quite good. And that's really the cast of this film, is those 3. Mm-hmm. So I thought they did a pretty great job across the board.
Yeah, I think so too. Julia Garner is very talented. Last Exorcism 2, We Are What We Are, amazing films. Christopher Abbott, it's really cool to see how far he's come back from, I think we first saw him in Girls, at least that's that TV show. That's the first time I remember seeing him. And then
I'm not familiar.
What's that? What's the sci-fi? He was in a really cool sci-fi movie. Oh, my God, I'm drawing a complete blank.
I'll find out.
It'll come to me. There's a sci-fi movie, and he was in a couple years ago that I absolutely loved. I can't think of the title. Isn't that horrible? It was right on the tip of my tongue too. If you're looking it up on IMDb. But yeah,
he was in Possessor and It Comes at Night.
Possessor, yes. Oh, It Comes at Night's fantastic too. Yeah. Possessor was really great. Wasn't that
was
Cronenberg's daughter?
Brandon.
But not Cronenberg, his son did it.
Yes. Brandon Cronenberg.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, the fantastic film. I love that one. It Comes at Night is excellent too. Anyway, my point is top-notch actors, very talented. No surprise there, and it's really cool to see that Christopher Abbott has come so far. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
All right.
The acting, yeah, like I said, aside from kind of like the Blake's wussy moments towards the beginning of the film, that kind of irritated me a bit, but definitely his performance as he goes through the transformation speaks a lot to his ability, and the way Charlotte and Ginger react to that whole situation while still trying to maintain some sense of sanity through all of it and to still try and survive without totally breaking down and getting tore to shit. I think they did a great job. And it's just towards that end when, it finally has to come to it where she's just like, this is what I got to do. Boom, pow, ta-dow. And then seeing them standing mother-daughter in the valley at the end, and how that connects to the feelings of the beginning with Blake and his dad, Grady, to start, man, it was well connected in like the kind of feelings you get from that moment in the beginning with those two and then with the other two at the end. I don't know. I feel like I'm describing this really stupidly. I'm not being
I wouldn't use those exact words,
but overall, the acting, I would say sits at a 4 for me.
Yep, 4 for me.
Yeah, it's a 4.
Okay.
I have a question. Maybe this goes back to story. So I know you always have to have conflict, right? And so they set it up. There is conflict between husband and wife. I wonder how the movie would have played out if there wasn't conflict. What if they were a happy married couple and they're like, oh, we're going to go, look, they finally declared my father dead. Let's go sell the house. Or I wonder how it would have played out in that way if they had switched it up.
I think it would have been a better film.
I kind of think so.
That's like my initial reaction when you say that is I would have felt the tragedy of the story far more if it was a happy relationship.
Yes.
I mean, I
haven't thought about it until just now, but I think you're right. I agree.
It's kind of, I know people hate on this film, but The Strangers Pray at Night is kind of a happy family going out. They've got family issues, but they're not on the verge of divorce and they're torn apart.
Yes.
And I love that film. I know other people don't. I love Pray at Night.
I love it too, yeah.
Okay. But it makes like that moment with the dad in the car accident so much more tragic. Or the brother in the pool. You feel everything far more knowing that it's a close family unit. So I definitely think that would have changed the movie.
And think of like Speak No Evil, and they just did the remake, which is okay. They sugarcoated it a little bit, but the original, the foreign film, what happens to that family? It's like, my God.
That was one of that was one of the most recent movies. So we watched the Speak No Evil. The only reason to watch that one is the remake is to watch McAvoy be fantastic.
Yes.
I hated the ending of the remake. It made me mad because the ending of the original was one of those that like I had to stay up and watch sitcoms for a while because it was
so disturbing.
It messed me up. So that was the American version sanitized that one to forgettability.
They sugarcoated it completely. And in fact, when the remake trailer started to come on, the first film was so disturbing that I couldn't watch the trailer. Like if I was in the theater, I'm like, I'm going to go to the bathroom. I can't even watch the trailer. And then of course they flipped it and it's kind of a home invasion with a happy ending.
But
so that first one, wow.
You should see, if you want to be disturbed, what country is that movie from?
Is it Norwegian? I have no idea. I don't know. Let me look it up.
Yeah, it's a Scandinavian film, but Speak No Evil. Don't watch the American version until you've seen the original one.
Okay.
Because the American one...
Speak No Evil too? Oh, yeah, 2022.
Keep going. Speak No Evil.
McAvoy in the remake is fantastic. He's excellent, but the ending is just garbage.
Oh, well, that sucks.
Denmark, Netherlands. It's so
Danish. Okay.
Danish film.
It'll stay with you forever.
I'm for it.
It's one of those films. It'll stay with you forever.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's my wife, when she watches a horror movie, her goal is to be as disturbed as possible. That's what she wants. That's why she doesn't really enjoy a lot of the 80s films because the 80s films, I always say horror should fall into two categories: disturbing and visceral, or wildly entertaining and fun. And if you're not succeeding at one of those two things, you're kind of just wasting my time. I love the fun ones.
How about The Substance? Have you watched that yet?
Not yet. I want to, though. The trailer for that, I was like, dude, that's going to be an intense film. Like, holy shit.
That is one of my all-time. Like, that's my favorite film of last year. Actually, that is going to be, I believe, our next episode. I would have to look at the schedule, but that is on our list for February. So we are talking that one with Ivy Tholen, for the author. So she'll be on for that one.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah. But she's one of our good friends. She's been on a couple episodes. She's great. But that movie, that one is wildly entertaining. And if you just sit back and think about it, I have so much to say about that film. I can't wait. But yeah, my wife loves to be
shrimp cocktail.
Yes, my wife loves to be disturbed in a horror movie. And Speak No Evil is one that she doesn't want to watch again because it was so disturbing.
Wow.
And it's not gory at all. It's disturbing on what happens to these people.
It's more an emotional impact.
I mean, it's not like gore porn.
No,
like August Underground. It's nothing like that.
Okay.
All right. So we've got a couple more categories to go. We'll try to zone in the direction.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
No, you're good. I love the tangents. 3 more categories. We are on the direction of this film. So the direction of this film is why I went to see this film. Leigh Whannell and his fantastic Invisible Man. So watching this, I thought the slow moments with the family were pretty basic. A lot of close-up face shots. Nothing stood out to me there. But what Leigh Whannell excels at is building tension. His tense moments, and I don't want to say scary moments, but yeah, he is so good at it. I mean, I think the first really big moment was the truck crashing. And that was executed fantastically. That was a great moment in the film. So was even the transformation. I loved just little things that he does, like turning the camera on the side, kind of falling with the character. Just the way he builds tension. He excels at that. He is so good at that. I don't know how many people think about, like, this is the other man in the cell in Saw. So we had Carrie Elwes and we had Leigh Whannell in that room. And he and James Wan worked very closely. You mentioned Insidious. They worked very closely on a lot of projects. And I'm kind of excited seeing Leigh get out and do more with The Invisible Man. He had Upgrade and this. I want him to make more films because I think he's a very skilled filmmaker. He's just hasn't made a lot of them. So that's one where I'm not sure. We talked a bit about studio interference on this film. I'm not sure how much of it was there, but there is a big difference to me between the slow moments in this film and the slow moments in The Invisible Man. And the slow moments in Invisible Man are still captivating. You're still glued to the screen. The slow moments in this one didn't have that same effect. And part of me wondered how much of that has to do with reshoots, how much of that has to do with rewrites. Are there things that were changed later? And so it's like, you know what, let's just get this filmed. I don't know, but I do feel there's a difference in those slow moments. But the key scenes we've mentioned, being on top of that greenhouse, excellent scene. Great build of tension from going to that truck onto the greenhouse. Excellent there. The slow transformation. Excellent. He really excels at that tension building stuff. And that stood out to me in this film. And just that foggy mountain setting. Love it. Love it. Just the small thing that I noticed is the opening scene when we're seeing this farm, and it's just shots, standalone shots. But then you notice like that shot of the window is actually bars on the window of a farm. And you start to notice all these are actually protections against the werewolf that we know is out there. But at first they just look like simple shots. I was like, those are nice little touches to it. So that's my thought on direction. I think he nails the tense moments, the softer moments. Meh.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have a whole lot to say. He's a very talented director. I'd love to see more from him. We don't really know what he had to work with and what he ultimately created as the final product, but true talent. Cinematography was fantastic. I should have looked up who the cinematographer was. It looked amazing. Pacing was a little weird. So you're talking about the slow moments. I even dozed off a few times in the theater. If you want to edit that out, you can.
Wow.
The slow moments, yeah, I don't know. But direction wise, that's tough, man. 3 or 4, I'd say. I hate to give it 3 because it's of who it is. If it was an unknown director, maybe first time movie, 4.
Probably would have been.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. 3 or 4, I'd say.
Cinematography was Stefan Duccio. Yep.
Okay.
He also did The Invisible Man and Upgrade. So they've worked together on that.
We at one point I interviewed a director and they said, if you want to make a fantastic movie, get one of the best cinematographers out there, and they will transform your vision into something that you wouldn't even have imagined yourself. Something like that. And that kind of resonated with me.
I can believe it. Yeah.
So I've always been curious. I feel like cinematography is, I don't want to say a new category, but I feel like it's a growing area of focus for people watching movies. Because growing up, I'm always under the impression that the director, it's his vision on the screen. He's laying out the shots. He is laying out the way he wants it to go. But lately I hear a lot more talk about like the cinematographer is doing that. And so I wonder if there's an evolution. I haven't talked to enough people behind the scenes, an evolution of who's calling the shots on films. Because one of the things like Hitchcock is known for is shots, the way he shoots his films, his visual style, his visual language. But he probably had a cinematographer too. I can't exactly tell you who, but how much of that is the director sitting there being like, I want this shot, you make it happen. And how much is the cinematographer going, I've got a vision for that?
It's got to be a collaborative effort, I would think. And the cinematographer has that. Their eye is for how will this look best on screen. And then the director sort of has the overall vision. So they have to work with the cinematographer. Kind of like the movie Smile, the first one. I know it gets a lot of hate. You either love it or hate it. But the cinematography in that is unbelievable.
Yes.
It just sucks you in, and the way the camera kind of spins around, and the opening scene where it goes like in her eye, and then the title comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. It's beautiful to watch.
I love the first Smile. That's one I didn't love the second one as much. I still appreciate the film. It's a great film, but
I love them both. And I keep bringing up other movies, The Wolfman. So that's my take on the director.
Okay. I love the conversation, and direction is Jonathan's least favorite category. So
yeah, if you watch any of our other episodes, it's just one of those things where I'm just like, bleh, what do I say? Mouth vomit. But with this one, I liked how in some of those scenes where with Blake at the start of his transformation, now like he kind of like bottoms out and everything kind of blacks out around him. The tone, everything just kind of goes to dark, and then coming back out of it, as he's coming back to realization and starts with like, what's happening to me? But one of the biggest parts for direction, I think, in this one that really got me was the part with the greenhouse where they escape from the truck and they're on top, and you can never really see the Wolfman that's coming after them. You kind of see the shadows and everything inside while they're on top. And like, is he going to get him? The jumping and trying to snatch it. And then seeing from the inside of the greenhouse and seeing who's on top from that creature's perspective at trying to get at them. I thought they had great play on those shots and how they did that. So overall,
that was one of the standout sequences in the film. I think that's the lighting, everything really came together in that moment.
Right, and thankfully they bought the extra sturdy plastic for the greenhouse.
Not super old, worn out stuff that you would expect to like
Someone
snap
came
under
in
you.
and redid the whole greenhouse.
Dad has been missing for years, but the plastic is in tip-top shape.
It survived the season so well. Yeah, okay.
The good Samaritans out there rebuilt.
All of the lights still worked. It's just
the
really
generator still worked once they kicked it on. Like, wow, it's been sitting there how long? But
it coughed out a little, but and the truck just needed jumped. The tires lost no air in the 10-ish years that he was missing.
Oh yeah. There's like 3 inches of grime on the windshield, but everything else is fine.
But everything else is fine.
Yeah,
no need for an oil change.
Right.
But aside from that,
it's like
though,
a shotgun in movies, right, where they never have to reload; it just keeps shooting. It's like wow, it's like a magic.
Shots.
Where'd all that ammo come from? Okay, that's believable.
Sorry, I interrupted, Jonathan.
No, you're good. But overall, I gave it 4. I like just the way they shot the scenes and everything. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty comfortable at 4.
I was a 4 as well.
Yeah, me too. Well, 3 or 4, but let's go with 4.
Okay. All right, so the it factor, this is the cultural significance of this film. We kind of touched on it at the beginning. The it factor for this is just wrapped up in a whole bunch of studio nonsense between trying to start that dark universe that didn't take off. This originally meant to be part of that. Ryan Gosling attached, different director attached, then you assume an entirely different story brought in. The Invisible Man was supposed to be part of that too, but then it's almost like they just let Leigh do what Leigh wanted to do for that, and it worked. And then they're like, "Hey, Leigh, want to do Wolfman too?" And he's like, "I guess." And he comes in here and does that. So I don't know how much of this is. It was rewrites. It was reshoots. This movie was delayed. How much of that affected the outcome? I don't know. We won't know unless it's in the, supplemental material on the Blu-ray. I don't know. But I do think that has impacted how it's been received. So we've touched on a couple things. I think the cultural significance of this film is that it has been pretty divisive. Not many people that I knew even knew it was coming out. And those who did have had very mixed reviews on what they saw. So what we've alluded to as we've gone, I think a couple things lead to the disappointment. No real werewolf in the film. So that definitely, if you're going to a movie called Wolfman, you're kind of expecting a werewolf. So I see where people are disappointed there. Because of that, there's also no real werewolf lore. So the werewolf fiends out there are disappointed with that. And the people who are going for something that was as finessed and refined as Invisible Man, we don't really get that in this either. So I think that there's a lot that kind of leads to their disappointment. But I have to say, after watching just the 3 movies that are titled Wolfman, and not counting all of the movies that have werewolves in the title, this is up there with the original for me on how much I enjoyed it overall. So, and this is a surprise. I said, watching the other 2 changed my opinion of this movie quite a bit, because the 2010 I mentioned earlier, that was also poorly received. The 2010 one was a box office failure. They lost money on it. It grossed under what they spent. It was up for awards as worst movie of the year. Couple people called it the worst movie ever made. Couple reviewers. So if we look at the history of Wolfman, outside of Lon Chaney Jr.'s, none of them have been tremendously like, this is the Wolfman movie. None of them have been resounding successes.
They should leave it alone then.
that is kind of what I'm getting at, is that I am wondering if the magic that was Lon Chaney Jr.'s Wolfman is a product of the time period that cannot be recaptured today.
Like The Exorcist, leave it alone.
Yep. The magic of that werewolf transformation in 1941 does not wow a crowd in 2025.
Yep.
It's not the same. So that definitely affects this it factor for this film. And I think it's actually a great conversation. I think it's super interesting to talk about how the 1941 movie, it's also a great story. It is a great story. But as we've talked about here, I think this one has elements of that great story, just not executed quite as deftly. So the cultural significance of this film, time will tell. This is one that I actually see a fan base growing for this in rewatches, because I think it's a jarring first watch when you're expecting a werewolf film. And I think if you go back and watch it again with knowing it's not a werewolf film, it is almost like an infectious disease film, a trapped room body horror. I didn't think it was that great on the body horror element, but if you watch it from a different perspective, I think this film's going to grow on people. But because of its initial wishy-washy, that definitely affected how I viewed its cultural impact right now. I also think coming so closely on the heels of what I would consider one of the greatest gothic horror films of all time. Definitely, you go from, if the last movie you saw before this one was Nosferatu, you're going to walk out with a very different take on what you thought of this film.
Gosh, the last movie I saw before this one was Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare in the theater.
Oh, wow.
Which I loved. Oh my God. If you haven't seen it, go out and check it out if you're a fan of the Pooniverse films.
I haven't seen those yet either. I want to. They seem like
pretty
they're crazy.
So good. Anyway, it factor, I would give it a low score because I don't know if there really is an it factor here. It's kind of forgettable. I am going to rewatch it and I'll probably buy a copy, and maybe it'll win me over more the second time through. I don't know how well it did with test audiences, but I can only assume that it didn't do that well, and that's why it got that sort of cursed January release date. Typically, that's when studios put out films that they don't think are going to do well, that January release time. And yeah, I'd probably give it a 2. Cultural relevance. I don't know.
Yeah, I was right there with you on cultural relevance. I'm 2. It's pretty low for me.
See, that's why I was thinking about. I was like, man, it's hard to score this one because it is such a different take on the classic Wolfman kind of story. So it's hard to say that it's really going to have any kind of like real impact on the film industry when it comes to werewolf films. It just doesn't seem like it really jumps into that category as hard as like the other films that we see, and what you normally get when there's some sort of werewolf action. So I don't. It's such a soft take, I guess. So a lot of people are going to be like, well, yeah, this is not what we were expecting action wise, in some regards, and from the standard. So maybe I overscored it, but I just went mid ground and went 3 on it.
You're close enough. You're close enough.
People may think it's an interesting take, and maybe that will play on the industry when it comes to making future werewolf films, but I don't really know it will have much of any, really.
Yeah. So our final category, we can kind of wrap up your final thoughts on it during this one. Then I'll go through our final scores and tell us what our average is. But our final category, the only category that's scored out of 10, so your more traditional, is just how entertained were you by the film? Everything aside, not critiquing it on a deeper level, just did it maintain entertainment for you? How entertained were you? I say a 10 means you would rewatch it immediately. So I'm trying to think of the last 10 that I had.
The Substance was the time.
Yep. Substance. I'm not going to spoil my score for that one. But that's where we are. I can go first. I'll kick us off. We mentioned the movie has trouble with pacing, so that affects my score. My score is a 7, though. I thought the tense moments were quite good. I thought the werewolf transformation, not like the big transformation scene, but the slow burn and showing us that kind of in and out perspective of what's going on. I thought that was really clever and smart. I would watch this movie again. I actually anticipate it being a movie that grows on me with repeated watches. So I'm at a 7 on this one. I'm not higher because the ending I kind of did not like at all. So the very ending, when it all comes full circle, I wasn't a big fan of it. I don't know how else to end it, but as I said earlier, it went for the same kind of ending as The Fly, but it did not have that same impact as The Fly. So spoiling it without spoiling it, it didn't hit like The Fly does. The Fly is a masterpiece.
I mean, that's what we were missing. We needed like a steamy moment, like in The Fly, the whole love story, and just didn't have that here. I'd probably go with a 6, maybe. Like I said, I dozed off. I got a nice nap in the theater, which I never, for the record, I never do. But in the moment, I was like, you know what? I don't even care. I'm going to shut my eyes for a minute. And I didn't miss anything, I don't think. I mean, I'm here and I'm able to talk about the whole film. But yeah, I mean, I'll give it another watch. Maybe I'll like it more the second time around. But I'd say a 6.
Okay. Well, I scored it shortly after having watched the film. And, instead of giving it more time to really sink in and think about it, now that we've discussed it more, I'm going to change my score because originally I was at a 9 overall, but I feel like now I need to put it down to an 8. I feel like 8's where I'm at with it, with the overall enjoyment, because you're right that ending was very lackluster, and I was kind of hoping for something a little more on that. So that kind of irritated me a bit. And to just, the dad parenting action towards the beginning just was kind of annoying. So I think 8's. I'm good with 8. I would definitely watch it again. Because I think it's a good film, and it's something that I've told other people about, and like, hey, definitely check this out. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I'd watch it again too. I mean, hell, I just watched Rumpelstiltskin from 1995. I'll watch this one again then.
So that kind of brings up a question I have. And that could be that it falls into the same categories that I've talked about of purely entertaining horror and visceral horror. But, you mentioned the Poonaverse movies. I couldn't make it through the second one. I struggled to make it through the second one. I watched the first one because I was curious, struggled to make it through the second one. I'm still intrigued by the Peter Pan one. I'm still going to watch that one.
It's good. But I loved Winnie the Pooh, so maybe I'm not.
Yeah.
Resource.
So I guess I'm looking at horror is so fascinating because we have this world where people love these movies, but then I see them critiquing a movie like this super hard. And so that's what, and I'm not calling you out, I'm saying that's one of the things that I really like about the scoring system that we have here is we've talked about the quality of the filmmaking in just about every respect, from the music, the editing, the special effects, and how well this movie was put together. But then we can still come in at the end and be like, it didn't hit for me. It's still a quality film. So I guess I get bothered by, and this is a personal anecdote, is it bothered me when somebody on Amazon gave The Substance 1 star and called it Looney Tunes. And I was like, what is wrong with you? But I see people give Wolfman like 1 out of 5 stars, and in my head, I'm going, it's a better movie than that, even if it didn't quite land. So that's just one of the things I love about this discussion is we're able to bring every element of this film to the table and talk about it. And, we realize, it brings some new stuff to the story. It brings some things we haven't seen werewolf movies do before in, and whether it landed for a particular viewer or not, there's still some quality elements to this film. So that's what I've loved about this conversation. Yeah. Someday we might get into the Pooniverse.
And if you ever do, invite me back. That would be fun.
Is Steamboat Willie part of the Pooniverse?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Those look. I don't know. Those look.
I got a lot of watching to do. Jeez.
Well, they haven't come out yet, so you're okay. I think Screamboat is the first one to come out.
Yeah,
Screamboat. So awful, and I'm sure I'll go see it.
There's a love for just terror. I don't want to say terrible, but like you said, it looks awful, and it's going to be fun. Like, it's going to be a good time. Yeah.
Bizarre films,
absolutely.
Man.
So going back to Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare, I know it's part of the Pooniverse, but it's dark, it's disturbing, and it has more of a real world story.
Okay.
So I think for that, I would definitely see it. And there's some gore and some crazy kills in it, like you'd expect. But I really liked it. I'm a fan.
All right. That's one that I definitely will check out. So our overall, I think, is this, Jonathan, is this your sister that also provided her score?
Oh, that's my cousin. Yeah, she took me to the theater since I couldn't drive and my ankle situation.
Cool.
I'm glad she found something out. Hooray.
Jonathan, your final score, I had you at a 40.
Yep.
I myself was at a 34. Your cousin was at a 38. And Aaron, you came in at a 36. So
is
that
a passing score.
So that would be 3.5 stars out of 5.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
I'd stand by that.
So that all combined, our total thoughts together put it at 37 or 3.5 stars out of 5. And I think that is, like I said, I think that's an accurate representation of this film. It addresses the quality of the film, but it's not one that's going to stick the landing with everybody.
I concur.
So I'm actually surprised that we were all actually so close, even though we had pretty differing opinions coming into it. So, Aaron, thanks so much for being here.
This has been a blast. I'll come on anytime. Do something else. And we'll
awesome.
Have some future collabs too with my channel.
Yes. Keep in mind our 13 Nights of Halloween, about to get the list ready to come out probably early February. 13 Nights of Halloween, we do 13 episodes in 13 nights leading down to the day of Halloween. But this year's theme is folk horror. So if you have any particular folk horror films to bring to the table, you're absolutely welcome back for any of those.
Let us know.
That would be fun. Yeah, let's talk.
Okay. So any other last words?
Just quickly, I wanted to touch on one thing that you were saying about the different types of movies. What I love so much about the horror genre is that there are so many subgenres. And some of the Winnie the Pooh movies, you go into those, you sort of expect something. With Wolfman, I expected more of a serious movie, and I guess we sort of get that. And I guess lastly, I mean, like I said, I just wanted to say that's what I love so much about the horror genre, unlike rom-coms, for example. Although maybe there are a bunch of subgenres there, I don't know. Anyway, I think it was very astute what you were getting at with horror movies.
Thank you. And I just watched, speaking of that, I just watched your interview with Steven Kostanski.
Kostanski, yes.
Oh, yeah, so where he was talking about, Frankie Frico. Is that it?
Yeah, Ghoulies Go to College. Yeah, Frankie Frico.
Yeah, we have the first Ghoulies. I think the first Ghoulies movie is on our list for this year to cover. But yeah, like you're talking about, those subgenres seem dead right now on big screens. But the smaller straight to release. Shudder's got great stuff. There's some great stuff out there. But yeah, horror has so many subgenres to get attached to and just fall in love with. I love them all, even if I sit here and I critique them out of love, because it's a passion. I love it. We do all kinds of movies. So if your last one we did was Clue,
okay, cool.
I'm excited to jump on James Gunn's Superman when it releases. I can't wait to talk about that. But it's out of a love for film. I just love movies and the way it brings people together. And honestly, any movie that can drive a conversation to last almost 2 hours, that's something special. I just love that so much. So again, thank you so much for being here. Jonathan, you have anything?
No, I'm good. I'm just, thank you so much for being here, Aaron, and being part of the conversation with us. And can't wait to see what comes next, man. Can't wait to have you on another episode in the future.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So you want to tell people where they can find you?
Sure. On Instagram, we are at A&B Horror Movies, and also at Aaron's Movies 8587. And on YouTube, you can just search for A&B with an ampersand horror, or A&B Horror Movies, and our channel will come up.
All right. He's got a ton of great interviews on there. Go check it out. That's all I have. Wolfman is probably still in theaters. Oh yeah, plug my book. Check it out. Aaron's sending you a copy. So
excellent! I can't wait. Thank you.
Yes. And if you get the book, there is a handy dandy QR code on the back end here for the average.
So I'll send you straight to us.
As well.
Oh, that's awesome.
I joked about doing my own The Average publishing company, but I just published through Amazon. I can set it up for you though. But yeah, so Wolfman is most likely still playing in theaters near you by the time this comes out. If you listen to us and you think it might be worth seeing, I think it's worth seeing in theaters. I saw it on IMAX. I don't know if paying the extra for IMAX is worth it, but it's a good movie if you're interested in Wolfman. If any of the things we've said interest you, check it out. It's not as bad as I've heard some people say. So, that's all I have. We will see you in 2 weeks with our next movie.